%80 of corporate wealth is now in just 10% of firms. And those are the firms that have the most personal data and intellectual property. So, mostly big tech firms, Google, Amazon, Facebook. Google is actually an interesting narrative arc because Google really invented the business model of surveillance capitalism. And that is the business model of essentially tracking everything you are doing, saying online and increasingly offline, and using it to build a profile of you and then selling that information to advertisers who want to target you down to a microscopic level. So think about that now as it moves into healthcare, into finance, into insurance. Here's a real-world example that is happening. Insurance companies are now putting sensors in some countries, in some markets where this is legal, sensors in people's cars or homes. So let's say I'm now driving with my child in the back and I don't stop quickly enough at a stoplight. That will be tallied. I might get a black mark on my insurance. First of all, that's, I think, incredibly creepy. But it also has the effect of completely changing the business model from a business model of the collective, in which it's about risk sharing and risk pooling, to separating all of us. Suddenly we are all individual risks. And perhaps you and I can be insured, but perhaps there's a pool of uninsurable people over here. It creates this real tier system, within society where there can be people who are completely disenfranchised. First, Wall Street and then Silicon Valley really have more power than any other entity. I see so many similarities between the way that Wall Street had both monetary capture of politics, but also cognitive capture of politics before the financial crisis and to a certain extent after, and the way big tech has captured the debate now. With the banks, there is at least some requirement for how they kind of mark things that they're doing on the books. With tech firms, you don't have any of that. So it's really, really a very opaque system. We're not doing transactions in dollars or in sterling. We're doing transactions in data. Yeah. And that is a barter transaction. It's a very opaque transaction. So if you think about what Adam Smith would have said you needed for a properly functioning market, you need equal access to information. You need a transparent transaction, so both parties need to understand what's being exchanged, and you need a shared moral framework. Now, you can argue that in the era of big data, none of those things are in effect. Think about the most opaque transaction in the financial crisis, the derivatives, weapons of mass financial destruction, and the kinds of transactions that we are doing on an hourly basis now are just as opaque, if not more so. We don't really understand what is happening in the algorithmic black box. One of the reasons that the big tech companies have been so reluctant to police political advertising is that they don't want to open up that algorithmic black box. One of the possibly elegant answers to some of the problems we've been talking about, from privacy to competitiveness to innovation, would be to create digital data banks where companies of all sizes in all industries could have access to data, but only in a way that citizens and democratically elected governments would decide. Suffice to say, we need to move from the old capitalist model to a kind of a new, more equal sharing of this wealth pie.